Thank you for joining us today for Access Academy. Today is part one of our Braille 2000 series focused on textbook transcription from start to finish. We'll be learning about NIMAS file basics, including accessing the NIMAC site and formatting content using Braille Blaster or Braille 2000. We are pleased to welcome our presenter today, Rosemary Baggott.
Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. I am the oldest of 6 children, and my youngest sister, when I was 13, she was born with a congenital cataracts. About 6 years later, I was volunteering at the little day school where she was a student in Philadelphia, and was given responsibility for one student who was losing his vision and hearing. And I had him for half of the day. I was pretty much creating his materials. So that was my being thrown into Braille. I started teaching myself Braille, transcribing his materials. Actually did one reading textbook because he was learning quickly. I was trying to keep ahead of the male. So I went on from there to get my degree in education, teaching elementary and the blind and visually impaired. I taught for 8 years in the school, and during that time did some in-service teaching for colleagues on Braille and other things related to the visually impaired. And in 1988, I became pretty much full-time Braille transcriber, been transcribing textbooks ever since then. So our course today, and this course, as you know, the purpose is to convert NIMAS files into Braille text using Braille 2000. And the process, there are 2 steps we're going to cover today. One is accessing the file from the NIMAC site as an accessible media producer, which apparently some of you are, and we're going to find out how to become one from Nicole, I imagine. And then to download, the process of downloading, saving, and converting the NIMAS file to Braille file. The rest of the course will be devoted to the actual process of formatting, editing, proofreading files to reflect your print copy and referring to Braille formats. Now, we're joined today by NIMAC Project Director Nicole Gaines and NIMAC Manager Liz Scholler, and I'm going to pass this next group of slides over to Nicole. Thank you, Nicole.
Great. Thank you, Rosemary, and welcome to everyone who is joining us today. We're so excited to have you and to be able to offer this training. Before Rosemary really jumps into the procedural aspect of the training, I do want to take a few moments and just provide some background for what is the NIMAC and what do we do? How do we support Braille transcribers? How do we support students? So without further ado, if we could move to the next slide. So the NIMAC, what are we? The NIMAC stands for the National Instructional Materials Access Center. We are a project that is funded through the U.S. Department of Education through OSEP, and we were actually created legislatively by the IDEA 2004 law. And our purpose is to serve as the national source file repository for K through 12 textbooks and related instructional materials. So basically what our primary purpose is that we receive files in the NIMAS format, and I'll talk in a moment about the NIMAS format. We receive these files from publishers and we catalog them. We make them available in a secure online system to designated users in the States to use in the production of accessible formats such as Braille, such as large print, audio, DAISY, EPUB, and so forth. So we have actually been in operation for 15 years now, which is kind of amazing. We have over 68,000 files, and actually we just ticked that over to 69,000 just very recently from about 160 different educational publishers. In terms of working with the states are not required to work with the NIMAC. We are an optional resource, but all 50 states, plus the eligible 6 outlying areas and the Department of Defense have decided to work with the NIMAC. So wherever you are, if you are in the US or in a territory, your state is working with the NIMAC, and we can help you get plugged into your state system if you need more information about that. Next slide. So in terms of NIMAS, and this is something in terms of the acronyms, one way that you can help keep this straight is that NIMAC, the C is for the center, that is the repository. The S stands for standard or the file format. And so NIMAC is the center. NIMAS is the file format that we received. So this again was created by IDEA, and it stands for the National Instructional Materials Accessibility Standard. It is an XML-based source file format. And if you're not super techie, Rosemary will probably make you a little more techie in the course of this training. But the most important thing about NIMAS itself is that when we talk about a source file format, we're talking about a digital format that's not intended to be distributed directly to the student, directly to an end user. All of us who are here today, we're familiar with using a wide range of user formats for digital files. For example, PDFs, or if you have a Kindle, you may have ebooks that you have on that Kindle. You're probably used to working with Excel sheets or Word documents and PDFs. And so all of these different formats, these are end user formats that are intended to be directly used by people. NIMAS, on the other hand, is a file format that's intended to be used by software. It's intended to be the starting point to create an accessible format. So as a transcriber, the most important piece of this is that if you do work with the NIMAC, or if you get a file and you get an account and you download a file, that file cannot be directly sent to an embosser. It has to be translated into Braille or another format before it's used by the student. And so this kind of brings us to an important aspect of how the NIMAC works with states. Because we are a source file source as the repository, we generally work behind the scenes. We generally do not work and distribute files directly to teachers and students because for the most part, individual schools don't ordinarily have the resources and expertise to create accessible formats. There are exceptions, and when there are exceptions, we're happy to help folks get access. But generally, we are working with agencies and organizations that specialize in producing Braille and other accessible formats. Next slide, please. So the next thing I want to talk just really briefly about is how we get files and what you can find in the NIMAC. And the first thing that I'll say is that if you've never been to the NIMAC website, I invite you to do that. Our website, our informational website, the URL is nimac.us. And from there, you can actually click a link to search the repository. So we're going to be talking a lot today about how accessible media producers access files and work with files, but I want everybody to know that you don't have to be a registered user to search the NIMAC. So if you're interested, we encourage you to take a look and see what we have in the system. So what you will find that's in the system is a wide range of student-facing instructional materials. The definition for materials that can be supplied to the NIMAC really provides the parameters for what we get, and that is textbooks and related printed core materials required for use by students in the classroom. So what this means is we get a wide range of materials such as textbooks, workbooks, supplementary readers, and we also get some ancillary materials like Black Line Masters. It's important to note, though, that not all materials that you might find in a classroom are within scope. For example, we don't get teacher's editions. We generally don't have materials that were already procured and being used in the schools before 2006. That's when NIMAC and NIMAS went into effect. We also don't generally have trade books, college textbooks, or reference books. Next screen. So the last piece that I want to talk about here before I hand it back to Rosemary is the most important part, which is how you can work with us. If you are a transcriber who can work with NIMAS files and you would like to be working with us, or even if you are, if you're in a larger school district and maybe you do Braille transcription just for students in that district, and it might be beneficial to work with us, I want to talk a little bit about how to make that happen. First of all, we talked earlier about the fact that all 50 states have decided to coordinate with the NIMAC, so we work with them, and it's basically a fairly hierarchical system that is in place. Basically, every state that coordinates with the NIMAC, they designate a state coordinator. That's the point person in each state for designating authorized users. Now, authorized users, that's an account type that's a little different from the accessible media producer type that most transcribers will have. Authorized users are individuals generally from within the educational structure of the state, and they tend to be folks who have a more intensive role in terms of either producing materials or coordinating the work by other organizations on behalf of students in that state. Authorized users, that account type can directly search and download any item in the repository. Of course, you have to have a user agreement that says that you will only, all users who can download files do sign an agreement that they will only download files that they are legitimately allowed to download based on what is being used in their state. But in terms of the technology, they have full access to the repository. They can also assign files for download to any registered accessible media producer. And this is where transcribers come in. Usually that's the type of account that a transcriber is going to register for. And the difference there is that an accessible media producer account does not require being designated by any state coordinator or any state. These accounts are freely available, and a Braille transcriber who works across states, you can work with an authorized user from any state. So you're not limited to working on behalf of one single state. So the caveat here is that if you have an AMP account, what that's going to allow you to do is download any file assigned to you by an authorized user. So that simply means that in order for you to get files, you'll need to be plugged into an authorized user or more than one from the state that you're actually working on behalf of. And again, we can help you with that process in terms of making those connections if this is work that you do. Registering as an accessible media producer, again, it's free and it's quick. And if you are interested in this, please just send us an email at nimac@aph.org to request the registration link, and we're happy to send that your way. And with that, I will hand it back over to Rosemary. But if we can provide any further information, or if you want further assistance, please reach out to us at any time. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Nicole. So the first step that you would go through once you've received, once you're an AMP with NIMAC and you receive a file assignment from an agency or an authorized user, sorry, you'll receive an email notifying you of that NIMAS file assignment. And then you would go to the NIMAC portal. You will already, as an AMP, have been giving a user code. I will show you that page in a moment. You're going to select the file that's been requested, add it to your downloads. You'll then receive another confirmation email from NIMAC saying that the title has been processed for download. You go back to the portal, look under the date downloaded column, see that it's indeed been downloaded, then you're going to go to My Downloads and actually download the file to the PC. Taking a look at that for a moment. Moving these things back and forth. There we go. So this would be the page you would pull up. And that has frozen on me already. There we go. NIMAC page for AMPs. I'm going to log in here. This is the page you'll see here with your title assignments. All of these, there's a list here, titles that will have been assigned to you. Let's just say this was the one I've been just assigned, and I would click Add to My Downloads. At that point, you wait until you receive another email from NIMAC saying that the download has been approved. You go back to the file, you'll see a date downloaded. Now, I'm not actually going to work with this file today, but I'm going to go to my downloads folder over here. In this page, note that there's the option. Please note that the download processing status indicator does not update automatically. So there may have been a file downloaded to you. If you're sitting there waiting for it to be downloaded, it usually happens within a day or a few hours. I found pretty quickly that it's approved for download. So I was sitting there watching for it in the beginning and found out I might need to refresh the window. But you can also click this option here, send an email notification when a requested file is ready for download in your downloads. At that point, it appears here. And I'm going to take this particular title, number corner, for example, and just download that to my computer. We'll come up here, and then it's mine. So from there, I would go back to my own files on my computer under my downloads and see the NIMAS file, which I downloaded earlier today and just conveniently did it again. I'm going to open that. I could copy it like that, I guess, but I'm going to open it here. The NIMAC files, there are 4 different, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me minimize this and go back to the next slide and discuss what that's going to look like. These are samples of the emails, notifications I received in my email. This is the first one, NIMAS file assignment, particular title, and then the ISBN number will appear in your second email after it's been processed for download. And the next part's going to be in the next section. So I'll just pass it back to Nicole for a minute, see if there are any questions thus far that anyone has.
Right now, we are caught up in all of our questions, Rosemary. There's been a few things dropped in the chat, but we are in perfect position for you to continue going.
Hey, thank you. Okay, so setting up NIMAS files on your PC. I started to do that, went to my PC files. I've already opened the zip NIMAS file from downloads. I'm going to copy and save those files to a project folder. When you open the NIMAC file, the NIMAS file, I'll get this straight. There are 4 types of files that appear. The images, those are individual image files. NIMAC will read all of the images in a textbook, most of which are pictures and graphics that would probably not be used for transcription. If you're working on a technical work, math or science, all of your math diagrams would also appear there. And so it's kind of a wading through, and I'll show examples of that later, seeing what you would use and what you would not. The WPS and PDF are print images of the front. It's actually not the front cover. I should have said the title page and the copyright page in the print book, which will be your primary source for transcription. You need to have that print copy, but those copies are there, so you'll have another reference for your title page. The XML file is the primary one we're going to use. Nicole suggested I might make you more techie. If you want to get really techie, Bob Stepp, the creator of Braille 2000, will be happy to explain to you how to read an XML file. That is above my brain capacity right now. But Braille 2000 and Braille Blaster both will take the entire XML file and convert it for you into Braille, which is wonderful. The OPF file, I haven't worked with those, but that basically contains identifying information about the file that's found on the NIMAC website, such as the grade level, authors, copyright year, etc. So let's go and look and see what I just said. Back to the, this is in my downloads folder on my PC. These are the 4 types of files that have been imported from the NIMAS file: the images, the OPF file, the XML, and the WPS PDF. I'm going to make copies of these all at once. and just copy them. Control C, I love the keyboard commands. I don't remember what the other option is. Click and copy somewhere. And from there, I'll go to my, is that available here? I have created a project folder for this course. I will have a project folder on my computer that I've created just for that work. Call this Number Corner, was the name of the textbook. And so in there, these are other files we'll look at later. I'm just going to click and do Control V to paste the 4 NIMAS files that were just downloaded. This other stuff would come later. Usually happens pretty quickly. Number Corner was a relatively small project, which is why I chose it for demonstration here. Okay, and they've all appeared. Sometimes it only looks like it's imported 2 at a time. And that's just the way it works on my computer. I'll click someplace else and come back to it, and they're all here. There's the OPF file, the XML. I'm going to take a look for a moment at the PDF, just to show you what that copyright and title page look like. And this would just be for your reference. And maybe we will look at that later. The primary one I'm going to be looking at and using is the XML document. That's what Braille 2000 and Braille Blaster both will import and convert for you. This is not actually, there it is. And you don't see that, do you? Nicole or someone, okay, Liz. I have to drag it open.
Sorry, Rosemary, what were you asking?
I was wondering if that had appeared on your end. I'm sorry, I see it now.
Yeah.
So this is a copy of the title page. And this would basically be for information that you would use in your transcription. This information here, there's a list. This I actually used on the second title page. So this is another reference besides your print copy. So the next, this has been created in here. At that point, I've downloaded, and that's all I need to do there. And I think go to the next section unless anyone has any questions. Here, let me come back on this slide. Any questions thus far?
It looks as though, I just want to make sure there's some questions and answers that we're putting in through the chat. But here's a question I don't think that I've heard quite yet. Does the tactile open in Word also? So the tactile file, does it open in Word also?
The tactile file is opened by Braille 2000.
Okay.
I understand the question. I don't think.
Okay, thank you.
All right. And I'm back to a little bit of a technical glitch and saying, how do I get this? Actually, no, you're good. Are we ready to go on? I'm not sure if that helps, but does anyone else have an answer for that?
I think that must be in reference to the actual transcription process working with the images. So that's further down the line. We're not actually going to spend much time talking about tactile graphics during this course. We're focused on the Braille transcription piece.
Oh, now if it was a reference to tactile graphics, those would be in the images file. And I will take a look at those later on. I think that's day 5 when we cover math like that. So thank you. Understand that now. So going on then, converting the NIMAS files to, I'm not seeing my slides on my screen is my problem. Now, are you seeing, can you tell me, Liz, what are you seeing there?
We are. What we are seeing is actually the presenter mode. You had switched out. So rather than it being presentation mode, we're seeing what it looks like on your end as a presenter mode.
And I'm not sure about that. Let me.
There you go. Now you're back to the
Right.
presentation mode, and there's Braille 2000 right there.
Right, and I've lost my own screen, which if anyone out there knows how to rectify that, I'd be happy to know. Otherwise, I'll go ahead without my notes. I'm looking at the screen with you all. So converting NIMAS files to Braille files using Braille 2000. I'm not going to read all this material. This is basically taken from the Braille 2000 website, but Braille 2000 is fully able to take an XML file and read it completely and import it quickly. So most modestly new computers should be able to handle full files. Again, I've imported some like huge ones and they've all worked through well. Well, they've all worked well. Bob Stepp, creator of Braille 2000, offers free technical support to program users. He is the one who will help you be as tech savvy as you like. I say he's brilliant. I believe he has the entire program in his head and can go to any point in his head, complete with reference numbers when you call him on the phone. So I've learned to kind of wade through and say, this is what I need to know. And he's happy to give it. The current version of Braille 2000, version 2.29, just came out on May 10th of this year. I had converted to that and ran this into some snags converting larger files from NIMAS. It will not convert the larger files, and I understand it's a math issue, according to Bob. Now version 2.275 will convert those larger files, so I had to go back to that. If you have 2.29, it'll convert smaller files and even a small math file if it's not too technical, and it'll convert any non-technical text. But if you need to do math or the larger files, Bob sent me a link to the old version, how to get back, and he'd be happy to do that if you should need that. It will convert to larger files. Math still needs to be done by the transcriber. Now he is working on version 3, and I understand, he said with excitement, math is coming. So he's doing a lot of extensive work on having Braille 2000 convert the NIMAS file, including the math content. I would still say, as I'm sure transcribers out there know, that in any of these versions, you're still going to need to edit the math. I'm thinking for maybe the next 100 years or so, since it's so complex. So the actual conversion process, I've already downloaded the NIMAS file to my PC. I'm going to open Braille 2000. And in the toolbar, I'll have the option of opening the source file. And the source file will be the NIMAS file that we've just looked at in my file folder. Then there will be a dialog box appear, at which point you need to make sure that it's selected. You're going to open the XML file. And then another dialog box will appear in Braille 2000, inviting you to select transcription settings, which I'll go through. Then once the Braille file opens, you save it as into your project folder, and you've got it set up. Let's take a look at Braille 2000. So I'm in Braille 2000 right now. I'm going to select a new work area. This actually is a new work area that I'm going to use, but I got that by selecting new up here on the toolbar on the left, new, and then work area. When I clicked on that, I got something like this. So in that new work area, I'm going to open the NIMAS file that I just downloaded. I go to open, come down to source file. It takes me into my file system. And it's only showing the two. That the Braille 2000 doesn't automatically show that the other two files, the OPF and the PDF, are here. It will only show the images and the XML. This is the one I want. I'm going to click on that. Come down here under file name. It's appeared. NIMAS files come in with the ISBN number and the word NIMAS. I've changed a lot of the files on my setup here today, so I would be able to find them quickly. Files of type, just make sure that it says XML. There are these other options, but you're translating the XML. And then I click open. This dialog box, go to the transcription settings. There's nothing under quick select, so I'm just going to skip down to Braille code. I want English, UEB. The other options, Braille 2000 will convert French, German, Italian, Portuguese, provisional guidance, or Spanish, complete with the accented letters in those languages. I've used the French and the Spanish successfully, and German. It's been very helpful. So for this course, I've selected the English Unified for this text. Yes, I want it contracted. The other options under are Sim Braille and uncontracted. And under print substitutions, now this is something I've just discovered recently. I'm sure it's been here for a while. When I'm importing the NIMAS file, Braille 2000 will make some changes to what it's reading in the NIMAS file as it's importing. For example, short dash. Most NIMAS files will read any print dash as a long dash. And since those are rarely used in formats, this option will allow you to completely, I'm going to select this one. This will allow me to completely eliminate any long dashes in the imported file. And then it will be up to the transcriber to look and see if you happen to see something in your print text that looks like it needs to be a long dash. You can then do that manually. But that's going to happen a whole lot less than this. Is a big time saver because it just takes out all of the long dashes in the file. At that point, I click OK. And when I click OK, which I'm not going to do right now because I did it earlier, it will automatically move the number corner textbook over to Braille 2000. And I opened that earlier today, and here it is. So you'll see that it's already done some of the formatting. A lot of the headings are done, formatting, paragraph format, lists, tables. I like to use the interpreter on in the toolbar. That gives me a green line that reads the text above it in print. And also the spelling, which will, and I look at that and I think, I don't know what's wrong with the word manipulative. That looks well, unless it's just not in the system. This is just the rough copy that's come in, the NIMAS file. It's this entire book, which is a small one. One of the things that comes in with Braille 2000, let me go back up here. Let me show you, for example, what happened with the long dashes are not there. I can do search, which is Alt S, F for find text. And I'm going to enter along. Actually, I'm not going to, because Braille 2000 has been freezing on me lately when I do that. It had to do with me re-entering the 2.275. I had some problems with some of the dialog windows, which Bob explained to me in an email how to fix, but I haven't had time to do yet. So let me look for the one other thing. In version 2.29, there's another option in the substitution box when I import, and that's to remove single quotes. In most of the English in our country, we don't use the single quotes. We rarely use them. Braille Blaster and the older versions of Braille 2000 read a single quote as read an apostrophe as a single quote when they import a NIMAS file. Transcribers out there know that they're two different symbols. And so I'm going to search right now to show you an example of this. This is the symbol for the single closing quote. I'm going to search from the top of the file and see it's right there in the word what's. So I have WAT single quote S instead of WAT apostrophe S. So that is why he created that substitution. Now, I didn't use that substitution. It doesn't exist in 2.275, but what I will do is in Braille 2000, again, Alt S F to find text. I'm going to enter the single closing quote, and I'm going to replace it. Oh, I forgot one section. I'm first going to select the whole file. So I'll do this for the whole file, and I just Control Shift N. Oh, that's not what I wanted. Yes, it was. Okay, so I highlighted the whole file. Now I'm going to search for the single closing quote. I'm going to replace it with the apostrophe, because 95 to 99% of what's translated in as a single closing quote is actually going to be an apostrophe in print. Then I'm going to select replace all. And this is a pretty small file, so I don't see any activity over here, but I can tell you that Braille 2000 just replaced that. Now I'm going to try searching for that single closing quote again from the top of the file, and it says not found. So they were all effectively all just converted into apostrophes. I've done the same thing with the long dash to the short dash before this. Before I found out about the substitution, you can select the whole file, enter long dash, and convert it into a short dash. I understand from Bob's step that it's also possible to create your own substitutions in Braille 2000. And again, he will be happy to tell you how to do that. I haven't gotten that far myself, but I just do it this way. So if there are any questions.
Rosemary, we do have a question. I hope that I can put this, we can sort out the context of it. Do you have to do print substitutions one at a time?
Okay, that is a good question, actually. It's a good question. I understand that, actually. No, that was what I was just demonstrating in the file. In the past, I've done them, I would do them one at a time until I realized, oh, this is problematic. And then I learned to do the whole file substitution that I just demonstrated. Okay, and if that's, I could always go back at the end if there's time left and show that again. If someone would like to see that again, I really like that feature. The window in Braille 2000 allows you to do some print substitutions, and then you can create your own in that importing file with Bob's help. It's a very technical thing. For me, I pretty much do the whole file substitution. Or sometimes I'll do a substitution of just a section of the file, which I'll again be demonstrating later, probably on the 5th day under math, if not before. So.
Okay, there is another question. Please bear with me as I try to read it, articulate it. You may have touched upon this. I'm not sure. So if so, redirect me. Does short dash mean hyphen character? Does long dash mean, and it says in quotes, EM dash quotes, if a long M dash were deliberately used in the XML file, why would you change it?
I think that's a couple questions. To answer the first one, short dash and the hyphen are two different symbols in Braille. And that's a UEB, Unified English Braille thing that could you read that last one again, please, Nicole? I understood it, just the last line again.
Okay, let's see. Does the long dash mean, in quotes, M dash EM? I'm not sure what that means, but I might not be, I'm not an expert.
No, I understood. Okay, that's actually an excellent question. Why, if the XML file reads it as a long dash, would you convert it? Because the XML file is not our primary guide to transcription. The primary guide to transcription is the Braille code you're using. Most of us Unified English Braille, sometimes if you're using eBay or something with NIMAC. That's your primary guide. And then the print, your actual print text is what you're going to need to look at. And as a transcriber, that's essential because the NIMAS file, they explained, is reading a print book. And as we all probably know, the print books are so varied in their design and layout. There will be a lot of type changes. For example, if you're looking at a print book, they'll do titles all in bold type. Well, in Braille formats, we don't do title. We don't do centered headings or cell 5 headings with bold type. So we're not going to go just with what the XML file does. It's a brilliant conversion but it's converting a visual image. And then we as transcribers have to go in and say, okay, how does this fit with formats and what am I going to change here? And I'll cover a little more of that as we come up over it. So if there's further questions on that, just You can ask again and I'll answer later.
Please go ahead and continue.
Thank you. So another way of converting the NIMAS file to Braille, and we want to get it into Braille 2000, but it's possible to use Braille Blaster as an intermediary step. Braille Blaster is a product of APH, and I'll leave this information for you to read pretty much on your own. It's from the Braille Blaster website, which is referenced here. There is a course dated January of this year on the Access Academy YouTube channel that's specifically devoted to Braille Blaster. It's primarily geared towards using Braille Blaster for transcription, but it does have some brief references to tools that are helpful in converting a file to Braille 2000, some of which I'll show. So to use Braille Blaster as an intermediary step, you're going to open it. It's a free download on the Braille Blaster site. Just as I did in Braille 2000, I'd go to File and Open and choose the XML file from the NIMAS files I've downloaded. These are some helpful features that I like using in Braille Blaster, and I'll just show those in a moment. Settings, I can select the translation. And now in Braille 2000, there was the option of selecting translations, different languages. Braille Blaster, I'll show the selections there. It has to do with UEB, eBay, and math. Some things there that are helpful. The other thing I like is the emphasis. I talked about how the NIMAS file will read the print directly as a visual image, and there's a lot of emphasis, a lot of bold type that's often put in headings that we don't need in Braille. So there's a way to eliminate those, which would make it with Braille Blaster. So then once we open the file in Braille Blaster on your computer, Braille Blaster will creates a BBX file, which is only usable in Braille Blaster, as I understand. But you can save that as a BRF, and then that's what that will open up in Braille 2000. And from there, you save it as a B2K file. So the BRF is just Braille ready. A Braille reader, I forget exactly what it stands for. I know somebody out there knows, but it's just a readable file. It's not one that you would translate or send out to, or that you'd work with. So let's look at that. Now, back to, I'm not opening Braille Blaster today on my computer. I took screenshots the other day because Liz's very helpful suggestion, because Braille Blaster pulls a lot of power and seems to freeze things on my computer. If I were to open that right now, I might lose all of you, or I'd lose something. So these images, when you open Braille Blaster, shouldn't take that long. Showing up on, okay, here we go. When you open Braille Blaster, this will be the page you see without the see all photos. I don't know how to fix that right now. That's from my laptop, but this is actually what the program will look like. The toolbar across here under File, Edit, Navigate, View, Tools, Settings, Emphasis, Styles, Insert, Math, and Help. The one before I open the file, I'm going to go to the Settings, Translation Settings, drop-down menu for that. These are some of the things under standard Braille standards that you can change to. I was opening a UEB file, but it will also open a file in eBay as eBay rather, which is the Braille code before UEB. You can open it uncontracted or contracted, eBay uncontracted, UEB uncontracted, Cherokee plus Nemeth, UEB uncontracted plus Nemeth, UEB plus Nemeth, and Spanish. Now, I'm working on a file that is UEB plus Nemeth, and I've actually found that Braille Blaster does some of the Nemeth math conversions in there, which again, I will show on day 5. Not all, but there are some of them in there. So my apologies, shouldn't have gone off. The other setting I go to after translation settings is emphasis. This is what I was talking about with the headings. Emphasis would be the bold type, the italics, underline, anything like that. So before I import the file, through Braille Blaster, I can actually select remove all emphasis from headings. And as soon as I click on OK, I get this little message, says finished removing all emphasis from headings. That happened quickly. I then went back in and removed emphasis from list prefixes. Again, if you know on an itemized list or a nested list, you'll often have in print, some of those headings will be bold type. We don't need that in Braille formats. That's a print reference point. So by clicking this, I eliminate that in the transcription and I won't have to do any substitution changes there. And then the other one is to remove emphasis from alphabetic reference entry words, often in a glossary or an index. The entry word is bold typed. Again, we don't want that in according to formats. So this will remove that when it's imported. Once I have clicked on those and received that OK message for each one, I go back to File. I'm going to click Open. And this will take me to my folder in my computer. And I'm going to select the XML file for that project. Now, it could take me anywhere on my computer and I have to find the relevant file, but I'm in the numbers corner file folder on my computer. XML, I would select that. It would appear down here under file name. I would then click Open and I would get this message in Braille Blaster parsing book. Now, if it's a small book like Number Corner, when I did this the other day, it converted in a few minutes. If it's a large book, large text, hundreds of pages, I click on that to import and then I go get a snack, come back to my computer and it will have done its thing. And this is what it looks like. So when Braille Blaster opens the file, you see the print text on the left. You see the Braille conversion on the right. This far left side describes what it did. It automatically centered the heading from the title page, did a lot of things in paragraph format, created a list. That's what this is all talking about. So that is, yeah. And from there, I go back to File. I'm not going to work in Braille Blaster because I want to get it into Braille 2000. So I go back to File, select Save BRF. Once I have done that, I think it just opens in Braille 2000. I'm going to go right now into Braille 2000 and see what showed up. That's the one that was a Braille 2000 direct transcription translation. This is the Braille Blaster translation. Again, in Braille 2000, I'm going to turn my interpret on, spelling is on. You'll notice the formatting that's been done already. Some of it, it's some of the formatting. We as transcribers have to go in. You have to go in and do the formatting yourself using formats, and that's what we'll spend the rest of the week, the rest of the course looking at. The one glitch, and I did speak with I think I spoke with Nicole or Liz about this recently, and this will be a question for NIMAS, is it inserts Braille Blaster, for Braille Blaster rather, Braille Blaster inserts the page numbers, which I don't necessarily want inserted because Braille 2000 gives me a way to enter those automatically. So I've had to see something like this. I recognize it and I will go through and delete it. The page turn lines, again, I'm going to delete because I'm going to create those in Braille 2000 later on. But you'll see these, if you use Braille Blaster, and right now it depends on the pros and cons for you, you're going to have to make sure you delete all of these. It's relatively easy for me to do it right now because they're all at the end of the page, but I'm not going to want to do that page by page for a file that's like hundreds of pages long. So I pretty much do them as I go through, but you have to be attentive to that. So that's the end of that section. If anyone has any questions.
So How close to final is a document when formatting for an imported NIMAS file? So we might, I don't know if we need to perhaps bring Nicole in for that question. Rosemary, if you can add to it as well. How close to final is document formatting when importing a NIMAS file?
Not very.
Okay.
There's a lot of it, and it's super helpful for the transcriber going through, because for me, if it's already found my headings and my sections, even if I decide to change a cell 5 heading to a cell 7 heading or a centered heading, because again, I'm working from the print textbook, looking through the whole thing. The NIMAS file, it's a great, I mean, it does a lot of that formatting there, but it's far from finished. And that's what the rest of this course will be looking at.
Okay.
Things we need to edit.
Great. Thank you. One final question I wanted to ask. We know that you are our expert today, Rosemary, on Braille 2000, but you might know a little bit about Duxbury. Now, I'm going to ask this question, but I also want to preface to the audience, we do have a course that will be coming out in June. So we'll be starting a webinar series that's using Duxbury for textbook transcription. But the question, Rosemary, is wondering about differentiating the difference between Braille 2000 from Duxbury. Is there a great deal of difference? Is it something that's apples to oranges? What would you say?
Well, related to NIMAS files, I've used Duxbury in the past, but I've been using Braille 2000 for the last, say, 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's during that time I've been using the NIMAS files. So I haven't done any, I would basically refer that to the next course.
Absolutely. So use this as an advertisement that we hope that you will look into the chat, and we'll make sure to keep dropping that registration link if you want to learn more about Duxbury. I think that we are good if you want to continue with file setup on PC.
Thank you. So this has to do with setting up my personal files on my PC. And there are probably as many different ways to do this as there are transcribers out there, and I know there's quite a few of us. So this is something that I've developed over the years, and this is what's worked for me. And so I wouldn't take this as this has to be this way. But for me, the most important thing is putting everything in one folder that relates to any given project. In this case, I'm using Number Corner this time. And I will show that. This slide, and basically, this is something I do with, well, I will do this for every file. Save as multiple files. I always keep my original NIMAS file. And then I work from that and create what I call a working file that I can edit as I go through. If it's a small work, I just use the whole file to create all my volumes. I start with volume 1. When I get to the end, I save as volume 2. I go back and I edit the former one. So I have, I'm pretty much using the same file. If it's a large file, and I have a sample of that today, a chemistry book that was close to 1,000 pages, you don't want to be working all in one NIMAS file because it's just too slow. You can't, and could freeze Braille 2000. So in that case, I will keep my original and I will edit my working copy. And I'm just going to do a quick demo of that. And I'll take like large text portions. For example, you have your front matter in a high school work like that. If you have back matter, your glossary, your index, student handbooks, answers, selected answers, things like that, I'll create separate files for those. And to do that, I use the search process. So I'll show that in Braille 2000, just do a little bit of work right now in Braille 2000. And I'm probably not going to do this the way I did it yesterday when I practiced this, because there's different ways you can do it. So let me go in here and go to, this is a sample file I set up with some of this chemistry project I worked on. Now, in this file, I would have my original NIMAS complete book, and then I would have my working file. And eventually I would end up putting my volumes, my any graphics files, any RTFs that are related to title pages. I keep them all under chemistry so I can find everything quickly. I'm going to open the complete book and just demonstrate some of what I mentioned. Now this is Braille 2000 open. It's loading this work area. Again, this is a large file. See if I can close some of these while I'm doing it. No, it won't let me do that. Basically, once it's open, I'll use the search feature that I already demonstrated. Go and find the title of a section that I want to put in a separate file. In the case of the chemistry, there's a student resources section. And let me go back and see if I can show this while that's opening.
We do have one question, Rosemary, that you could probably answer while it's loading too. Someone asked, just out of curiosity, do you like to use multiple monitors when you are working on files?
I have actually not done that. I was just recently shown by my daughter how to use multiple monitors for the purpose of this course. It's intriguing. I might do that at some point, but well, actually, yes. If I'm using a PDF, if I've been sent a PDF by the sending agency, I have to. And I'll have the PDF open on one and the Braille on the other. If I'm using a print textbook, I pretty much work on just one. But I know the advantage of the multiple monitors. You can have a larger screen, which would be helpful. There it is. It just came in with a bang. So this is my NIMAS complete book. And you can see, I can tell right away, this was imported through Braille Blaster because of the page numbers there. This file, if I do Control N and go to the end of the file, you see that has 3,272 pages in this file. Now that's before editing, adding tables and graphics and all of that, but that's still way too big a file to work with on a regular basis. So having looked at the print book, I'm going to first decide, all right, I'm going to create a separate working file for the student resources, and I will do search. Again, I do Alt+F, and I'm going to enter. Now I have to enter it exactly the way it appears in print, and I remember from my notes that it was all capped student resources. I'm going to search from the top. I'm going to go over here and turn on this interpreter and spelling again. Now it takes me to the first place student resources is found in the file. This is on page 22 of the file. So I know that's not the actual student resources section, it's the title page. I'm sorry, table of contents. So I do the search feature again, Alt+F. I keep that entry, and instead of top, I can search from the top, from the cursor, or from next. I'm just going to say next. The next place the student resources heading appears in the file is on page 2274 of the file here. So that's my student resources section. I'm basically going to go from here, Control-Shift-End, and highlight the rest of the file from that page to the end. I'm going to copy this. There were some Control-C. There were times in the beginning where I would just think, I'm going to make this section smaller, and I would do Control-X. I would cut it. It was copied. And then something would happen if the computer shut down or whatever, and I would lose it. That's why I always keep my original file and don't do that until I've pasted it somewhere else. So I'm going to go back to Braille 2000, create a new work area. And right here, I'm going to do Control-V. And this is pasting the student resources section of the chemistry book, which will then become my working file for that part of the book. You see this over here, it's where it was saying paginating. I don't know if you caught that. It's counting the page numbers. When that stops, it's all finished. I'm going to save this file, Alt-F-A, as student resources. Now I'm not going to save it in here. I'm going to make sure I'm in the right folder. Under this, here's my sample file set up for large works. And I'm going to save it right in this file. Okay. Now that that is done, I'll go back to I can go to the beginning of that. See, I have the student resources. Notice it's done a good bit of formatting. Again, things that I will have to format, I'll have to do substitutions on and change. I'm going to go back to the, where was it? Chemistry complete book. And now I'm going to delete that section. Braille 2000 gives me a nice warning. I'm grateful for this warning. You're about to delete a highlighted region. Do you want to do this? In my case, yes, I have this saved elsewhere on my computer. And again, see the paginating over here, it's deleting that whole section. At that point, I'm going to save this file as, instead of chemistry complete book, I'm going to call this my working file. This is for my reference. I already did that yesterday. They were asking me if I want to overwrite the text. Do you want to overwrite this file? Sure, because I'm working on it right now. I'll do that one more time with another section. This is now the working file. This is the chemistry book without the student resources section. So you see the this has been reduced. I still don't want to work with this much of a file at a time for transcription. So I could do this in different orders. I'm going to select what I would use for my working file for the beginning. Let's say the first several units, first several modules. So I'm going to do that this way. I'm going to search again. And I'm going to take a wild guess that, let's say if I go to module 5 and I'll say module 4 in this book, that I can work with that much at a time. I'm just seeing how big it is for now. From the top, page 15, that's still in the table of contents. I'm going to do it again. Search again, next. I'm now at page 312. I've been working with this long enough on my laptop. I think I could include one other module. So I'm going to go back to the search again, and I'm going to change that to module 5 and see where that comes in. I'm going to take it from the cursor because I want to see where module 5 is in the book. Okay, I've got 407 pages now. I think that's okay. So I'm going to take the first 4 modules and the front matter of this book and make that my first working file. From here, I'm going to do Control Shift Home to take me back to the beginning. I've now highlighted from the beginning of the book up through the end of module 4. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to create another new work area and paste that beginning of the book. Once I do that, I'm going to save this file as my volume 1. Oh, too fast. No, there I am. Oh. I clicked too fast. I have to do that again. I couldn't get this to jump right to that page. I'm going to the chemistry setup. I'm going to save this as, well, I already did it yesterday, but save this as volume 1 and click save. It's telling me, asking me if I want to overwrite this file. I don't need to because I already, well, let me do that to see how long it takes. All right, so now I have what I'm calling volume 1. It's not going to be all of volume 1. From here, I'm going to start my transcription project, inserting the front matter and go through the volume. When I get to the end of this file, I would save it and then use that to create the files after that, which I'll do and talk through later. So that's just an example of how I can create different subfiles to make my working file smaller. Going back to the one that I had called my chemistry working file, now that I have this much of the book saved in another file, I can delete that. And the next time I go to gather more material from the large working file, I'll be in module 5. Any questions thus far?
There are. It is a very lively chat, and we are doing the very best that we can behind the scenes in trying to wade through questions and comments and so forth. I am looking over to see what we might be able to, I'm going to read a question, and perhaps between the both of us, we might be able to sort out the context if it's helpful. It says, it looks like all formatting is done in Braille viewing mode. Is this correct? That there is no text view mode for imported XML content?
I think this might be an answer to that. Let me go back. Thank you for that question. That shows a feature of Braille 2000. Over here in the tool window, I do all of mine in Braille mode, but it's not necessary. Actually, I sometimes use this. Over here on the toolbar on the left for Braille mode, you have, what is that? A is ASCII. You can click on the A icon and it converts the whole thing into ASCII. The view. There's my Braille view. P is for print. So I will sometimes use this. There are times that, and what is this? I don't really know. Oh, show source view. Whatever. So I don't know if that answers that question. I will add one other thing from there. There are times that I need to enter a lot of text. Oh, I think this gets covered tomorrow, but the copyright date of your NIMAS file, I believe NIMAS is pretty quick at updating things. But when I first started with this chemistry book, for example, the only NIMAS file available was an older copyright than the textbook. So starting out, I had to edit very carefully. Most of the material was the same, but there was, for example, there was about a page worth of material added at the beginning of each module in the newer copyright, which was my print version. And so I would have to do that as direct entry. And at that point, I can do the direct entry pretty quickly in Braille, but there were times when it was a lot of text. I just thought, oh, let me type it. And at that point, I can come in here and I'm going to just type here in the middle of this file. Oh, probably should do it in Braille.
And if you don't mind, Rosemary, I would kind of like to just chime in on this and say that, you know, as Rosemary mentions, if you have a different copyright date, that will generally indicate that it's a different edition of the textbook. And we would recommend, if you're not finding the exact ISBN in the system, contact us and we will try to get that specific edition that you need, excuse me, into the NIMAC, because occasionally, you know, some editions may be almost identical to an earlier edition and some may be unrecognizably different. So we're always happy to follow up with the publisher to try and get the exact edition that you need. Thanks, Rosemary.
Thank you, Nicole. And yes, that just happened for me recently, and I'm very grateful for the process in finishing this particular text. So yes, so this I just typed in with my keyboard. And you'll notice that here, this is typed as print and the translation is in Braille underneath. But I don't know, hopefully that answers that question. Any other questions? I'm actually at the end of the presentation, unless anyone wanted me to go over that copy and paste section one more, or copy and paste process one more time. I went into my student resources, and I went into the student resources folder and copied out the glossary and index into another file, because I was making a lot of supplements from the back of this book. So I could demonstrate that, or I've demonstrated already, how I do the process. I'm sure others have other ways, but yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I saw something in the chat that I wanted to bring up to Nicole. Maybe Nicole can speak to it because it's more about the NIMAC side of things. Someone mentioned that you sometimes have to be careful about the printing history or the particular printing of the book that you've been assigned. She says that occasionally she's had the same ISBN for the NIMAS file not match up with the particular printing that she's looking at. And Nicole, I don't know if you wanted to speak to that at all.
Sure. And I anticipated this very thing, because I just put a note in the chat related to this. And, basically the way that the NIMAC works is that, you can have many printings of the same ISBN, and publishers don't. Sometimes they will submit a news file if they've made significant corrections to an edition or significant changes, but at any given time, we will only have one printing of the ISBN in the NIMAC. So it's possible that the printing that we have may be the same ISBN that you have, but depending on the printing, it may have some differences. So if you find that that's an issue, if you're ever in a situation where you've got the same ISBN, but the printing that I have is so different from the NIMAS file, let us know, and we're happy to work with you with the publisher to see if we can get you a different alternative. Basically, for logistical reasons, it would just be impossible for us to have 10 printings of every ISBN that we have in the system. So that's not possible. And then the other side of that is that a new printing, it may actually be identical to the last printing, or it may be really, really different. So there's just a lot of variation with that. But the long and short of it is, one of the things that you can do if you're finding that, hey, this file doesn't quite match up to the book that I have, even though the ISBNs are the same, check out on the copyright page. There's a little line usually underneath the copyright statement that will indicate, and we can help you with that as well if you're not familiar with what I'm saying, but it'll usually have like a printing number and a date, two pieces to it. And so if you're finding that those are different on the PDF that's in the NIMAS file set and the print book that you have in hand, and that's causing some issues for you, feel free to reach out and we'll see what we can do to help you with that. Thanks, Liz.
I tried to find that on here, and it doesn't seem to be on this particular page for this book. But.
Right. Well, that's another thing. Not all print books have a printer statement. Some of them do. A lot of the core textbooks do, but sometimes they don't include it. So if it's not there, then that may not be information that's available to you.
Thank you, Nicole. If I can just add to that, again, this would be just more emphasis for why we really need to be checking the print book. I mean, the NIMAS files are wonderful, but there's still that need for editing. And thank you for that question. I didn't realize that about printings. Yeah.
I'm also seeing some questions in the chat. I'll just summarize that there are some questions about math and some questions about images, image descriptions, that kind of thing. So I just want to give you the opportunity, maybe Rosemary, to mention the topics that you're going to cover in our next sessions.
Well, I know math I'm covering in the final session, which would be the last Tuesday in May. And that's, yeah, so we'll be looking at that more in depth. And one reason I'm waiting till the final session is I'm actually going to see how far Bob Stepp has gotten with his version 3. It might change things. So, yeah.
And is there anything that you wanted to touch on about what's coming attractions that have to do with alt text, image descriptions, things of that sort?
For me, image descriptions, if they're needed for the print, I mean for the student, basically down in the transcribers note in the context of Braille 2000. Now that's images, that would be again in a technical text where the image just is not graphic, not suitable to graphics. The image files in NIMAS, I mean, I could show a quick look at this one as long as we're here. See, where's the.
And while you're doing that, Rosemary, I just wanted to chime in a little bit on the math and just make a note that, you know, some files that are in the NIMAC include optional XML tagging called MathML, and that is a way of providing mathematical and scientific notation directly in the XML, so that if you have software that can convert MathML, like Braille Blaster can convert MathML into NIMAS or into UEB Math. Not all translation tools support MathML, so I just wanted to note that if you have a file that has MathML in it, when you go to download it, it will actually tell you, because it will prompt you and ask you, do you want this file with the MathML, or would you rather just have the image files and not the MathML code included in the file set? So we actually, just in case you have software that can't work with MathML, you do have the option at the point of download to download the file without the MathML in it. So if you have any questions about that, just let us know. We're happy to provide you some additional information about that.
Yeah, thanks, Nicole. And I actually have noticed, now this was even before, I don't think I had downloaded anything specifically with MathML, but still both Braille Blaster did do a significant amount of converting math and UEB. And in this more recent one that I'm doing, when I selected the UEB with UEB Math, when I selected UEB with NIMAS, some of that was converted as well, not all of it, but I will show samples of that. I have some samples of both that I'll be sharing on day 5. So, and this is on the screen. If this, I opened the images file in the NIMAS download for number corner. And so you'll see some of these would be ones that would be converted into graphics, and others are pictures, you know, the ice cream. So those would be just described if necessary. It depends on the text. And again, if described, I do that with a TM.
And I know there was a participant who put in the chat, it was said, I have found that some NIMAS files contain image descriptions. You must look at them carefully, as they are not always accurate or helpful to Braille readers.
Yeah, I've seen that too.
And actually, let me go ahead, and I just put something in the chat that was related to that as well. And this is one of those things where, you know, image descriptions are optional for NIMAS. They aren't required. And what this means is that sometimes publishers will tell their conversion vendors, add image descriptions, we'll pay you to do this. And this actually provides an opportunity to talk a little bit more about the NIMAS production process. And one of the important pieces to that is that publishers, by and large, do not know how to produce NIMAS files. This is something that they outsource to third-party conversion vendors who specialize in digital file conversion. And so as a result of that, often what we will find is that image descriptions, which ideally should be supplied by the publisher, are supplied sometimes by conversion vendors. Sometimes those vendors do a great job. Sometimes they provide really high quality image descriptions, and other times they don't. And so this is actually something that we've been paying a lot more attention to recently. The good news is that more publishers have been providing image descriptions, but the flip side of that is that we're finding we have to pay a lot more attention because in some cases the image descriptions are not the best. So we're working to try and provide additional training to publishers and conversion vendors, because we know that when the image descriptions are good quality, they can be really valuable. And so that is just something that's on our radar, and we're trying to help publishers do a better job at.
I would just add to that I've seen some image descriptions that were very good and others that weren't really relevant. But as an educator, you know, most of us will know that what a publisher sees may be totally different than what you need to put in for a student reading that. Because part of what we're doing as transcribers is looking at the text surrounding that image. What's being asked for in the problem? How much of this do they need? Do they need to see all the details of a house? You know, if it's a geometry question that just has to do with the angles here. Do they just need to see the triangle? So that's the kind of thing that I think we're always going to have to do, because they can't really do that thinking for us. So.
Exactly. Exactly. I think there always will be that piece. There was also another question in the chat regarding alt text for MathML, and I just wanted to note that alt text is also, it's optional for MathML, but fallback images are required. So any file that you see in the NIMAC that has MathML, it will also have the images for the math equations. If you're not able to use the MathML, you will have access to those images. So there are always going to be those two options for you.
And Rosemary, as we close out today, here's a final question for you to explore from someone in our audience. Rosemary, when you get to the end of the transcription of a textbook, are you reading the entire textbook to proofread it?
I do that as I go along, and then with each volume.
Okay.
I'm sure that's.
That's great. Thank you. We learn from each other, and by finding out what other professionals do. And it's been a real treat to learn from you today, Rosemary. And you know also that this is just the first out of 6. So there'll be 5 instructional series, and the very last webinar in this series of Braille 2000, which airs on June the 1st, will be an entire Q&A section. So when you let all of this information marinate in your brain over this next few hours, maybe jot down what your questions are, and know that we will have a time to circle back and ask, get those answers to those questions.